So my platform lift wasn't lifting. The extra weight seemed too much for the drivetrain, and a chain was slipping. I tried to remedy this by adding 2 idler gears to increase chain tension, but this pulled up on the floating cradle, resulting in the swing not reaching its apex. I thought it might be best if the platforms had their own driving mechanism, which I could possibly install within the framework of section 1. Before I began tearing it open, I built a test rig to be sure that whatever I designed would actually work. The test was mostly successful. It only moved 8 modules distance rather than 9, which I was willing to accept, and though some slipping did occur, it could easily be fixed with a stronger frame. Once I'd redesigned the framework to support the new mechanism, I began the long process of removing each part of the facade, splitting the framework in 2, and removing the middle and upper section for rebuilding. The whole process took around an hour, and with everything back together, a quick test run ran smoothly. But while adding in the drive shaft that would deliver power to the platforms, I noticed that the mech had a significant amount of play in it, which could allow for the meshing beveled gears to move away from each other. So I had to once again pull apart the framework to add in some stabilising arms. Finally, I was able to add in the drive shaft and the supporting column of frames, then connect everything together for a test run. It took a few attempts and tightly squeezing connections together, but finally we got movement. In my quest to design a strong and supportive frame that also allowed free movement, it all started to look kind of a mess, so I spent a few days designing something much cleaner. I got rid of most of the frame surrounding the lift and reduced the drivetrain for the horizontal platforms to a single gear connected via a chain. With a pick-a-brick order of bright green bricks finally arriving, I was at last able to build the updated Section 2 background, with the new tree line and cutouts for the floating platform sliders. I'd also made some minor changes to the clouds, adding an additional connection point to make them less wobbly. The 2 platforms worked really well in isolation, but how would they perform with everything else thrown into the mix? Unfortunately, not so well. You can see framework flexing here as the meshed gears pushed away from each other, but could it work if I was to further reinforce connections? Frames are a great way to do this, as there's no possibility of flexing, and doubling up beveled gears will strengthen the connection between teeth, though I realised I couldn't do this here as they also needed to drive the 28-tooth gear. Turn wheels are also a great way to prevent gears skipping, owing to their much larger teeth, so I replaced 2 lower gears with these, but then I also replaced the upper gears, completely forgetting that I also needed to drive that 28-tooth gear. It wasn't until the next day that I realised my mistake, but it seemed that replacing just the one set of gears was enough to get things working. The movement still wasn't particularly smooth, so I swapped the 36-tooth gear at the input for a 28-tooth gear to lower the gear ratio and increase torque just a little. I also moved the crank arm away from the grassy platform, allowing me to push it closer to the facade, and reinforced the frame to reduce wobble. All my mechanical elements were now working together. Well, all but one. There was still the final battle scene, and my previous failure to add more movement to Dr. Eggman's ship had lit a fire within me, so I spent a few days thinking things through and designing a new prototype. One of my first considerations was whether I could turn the ship and swing the wrecking ball as one movement once the ship reached its turning point, but this would mean suspending the weight of the wrecking ball at the swing's apex as the ship travelled, as gears would only be in contact during the turn. I did consider the use of a counterweight hidden behind the backdrop, but I'd still have to devise a way to prevent free rotation during travel, so I decided against this idea. I didn't want the ship to turn as soon as gears came into contact, nor did I want the resulting grinding sound as they meshed, so I wondered whether I could use turn wheels extended with bars with light covers on only 3 of the teeth. If I could time it correctly, as the ship's gear cradle moved into position, the first tooth of the flanking gear would skip over the cradle's gear, allowing the ship to reach its full distance travelled before turning. I only wanted the ship to turn 180 degrees, so a connector on the drive shaft that turned the ship would limit rotation, and a gear with a clutch would allow the input gears to continue rotating without breaking things. The swing of the wrecking ball would be created through a gear rolling across a rack as the whole shuttle moved back and forth. While it appeared that a physical model would work in principle, I wasn't so confident about nailing the timing of the turn wheels, so I decided to explore a different option, using a chain with a vertical bar on a single link to turn the gear under the shuttle. I got rid of the heavy clutch for a pin with friction to reduce the stress exerted on the chain, which worked perfectly in initial testing, but after designing and building a stronger shuttle, stopped working altogether. The frames were admittedly too close together, though you can see here the connector still manages to turn, but with all the added weight of the ship, it barely moved. Looking up alternative Lego clutches, I found an idea utilising a differential, that again worked with no load on it, but failed once the ship was added. I spent a few days testing different ideas, finding the most success with the simple elastic band. Now I just needed to turn this test rig into something usable.